I'll now call to order the workshop of May 13th, 2019. First on the agenda is Mr. Dan Goyette, Director of Public Works, talking about recycling. Thank you, Dan. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'll start by just kind of briefly giving you an overview of Auburn's current recycling program, how much it costs, and where. I know there's been some questions as to where the waste actually goes. I'll briefly go over that. I can get into more detail if you like. But to start, we just signed a 3-year extension with Pine Tree Waste to do our zero sort recycling program, which is collected twice a month. The cost for that program is, it's a floating formula. So there is a processing cost of $125 a ton. That's essentially covering their cost for collection and sorting. And then there is an ACR, or average commodity rate. All recycling is basic, it's a commodity business, meaning markets go up, markets go down. So what that number is the revenue that's generated, and that's subtracted from our processing cost. So currently, the ACR is around $20. We pay $125 a ton. So in a sense, we pay so you take that 125 minus 20, you're left with $105. That's essentially what we pay per ton to dispose or recycle our recyclable materials at this time. There's been a lot of discussion as to what happens to those recyclable materials. All of the recyclable materials that you put in your zero sort recycling bin are currently recycled or sent to recycling facilities minus glass. There is currently no market in the state of Maine for glass. The only facility that used to take glass in Massachusetts went out of business last year. So currently glass is landfilled. There has been legislation put forth to mandate that in terms of state projects and federal projects, that 5% of aggregate, so soils, gravels, contain glass. That's been the push so that that market rebounds and there's actually a place to go with glass. All of the material that you put in your recycle bin, other than glass, is recycled. It's various markets. Some goes to Korea, some goes to Canada, a lot of it goes to Alabama. This is specifically related to the city of Auburn. Some of it is paid to dispose of, some of it costs the recycling company money, some of them generates money. The only thing that people should be aware of is contaminated materials. So you put your peanut butter jar half full of peanut butter in your recycle bin, your pizza boxes that are all soiled, those all go to Juniper Ridge, which is a landfill in Old Town, Maine. So what happens is the truck goes around, collects all the recyclable materials. It's then dumped on the floor at Casella's recycling facility located in Lewiston. It's sorted. Clean materials are bundled, packaged, however they go, sent to market, and the contaminated materials are trucked to Old Town, where they're landfilled. So I know there was a question as to what the cost to the city would be in terms of savings. If you're going to look at it only monetarily, it's about $75 to $100 a ton in savings the city would see for recycling if the recycling materials were simply put in the trash and sent to Maine Waste to Energy. Maine Waste to Energy is a MSW combustion plant here in Auburn, formerly called MWAC. They generate about, the exact number is 17,000 megawatts of electricity. That's based on 72,000 tons of MSW that is burned. That's enough to power essentially 2,000 single-family homes. There are 6,000 single-family homes in Auburn, so about a third of the homes in Auburn are powered from this facility. There are many benefits in terms of this plant. All the metals post-combustion are removed from the ash and are recycled themselves. That's a revenue stream for the facility. They actually have a new method or system that was put into place, I believe, last year or the year before, to get those metals, so they're even more successful at removing the metals before the ash is landfilled over in Lewiston. It is actually a very clean facility, in meaning everyone sees the large smokestack. It's most of what comes out of that stack, 99% of what comes out, well, 93% of what comes out of that stack is actually vapor, water vapor. It's 7% carbon dioxide. And one thing to realize with these type of facilities is they are a net negative in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. It is actually worse to landfill material straight from the waste stream to the landfill versus burning it, because of the amount of methane that these materials give off as they decompose in a landfill. It's actually better for the environment to combust these materials. And one benefit of that is you're generating electricity. That's done by creating steam in the plant. It turns a turbine, and that's how that works. There are no heavy metals. They're all the quote-unquote bad things you can think of, heavy metals, particulates, et cetera, are all below the detectable limit, meaning they may be there, but they're so trace amounts that you can't detect them. They're in the noise of your testing. Kind of scientific there, but it's below the detectable limits. The particulates are extremely small. There are limits to the particulate size that are allowed to go out of these smokestacks. They're limited in size, microns, so that they don't create nucleation sites. What a nucleation site is what creates smog. So it gives the atmosphere something to grab a hold of, and essentially chemistry happens, and that's how you create smog. These particulates are small enough that that doesn't happen. What else can I talk about? I guess I'll stop there and kind of open it up for questions.
I'm going to turn this over to the council. It's, one thing, you threw out some numbers, if you could.
Yes.
I think we can get back to that. I don't think that's as relative. Council, any questions for Dan? Mr. Goyette on this? Alfreda? Councilor Fournier?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've recently watched some footage of Singapore, a small island surrounded by water. They have no place to bring their trash. And they're doing exactly what we're doing here at what I call MIMWAC, the burning of the trash. And there is no toxic air coming out anywhere in the island. I live in close proximity to MIMWAC. I don't get any dust or any filament,
no,
nothing.
It's extremely clean.
I am very close, very close to MIMWAC. So I don't see a problem with what's going on right now when the burning takes place. I don't smell any smells, anything any differently. What I saw with the Singapore footage, that research that was out there really cemented in my mind the benefits of doing it this way versus filling landfills and things float out in the water and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that was a challenge to them that they provided a solution to was the ash. They have a receptacle close to the land, but with a barrier to the ocean, where they dump just the ash, and it's not a whole lot of ash by the time they're done. I was going to ask you, what do we do with the ash with what we're currently doing?
It's actually, when you burn MSW, it's about a 90% reduction in volume. So say you had 100 yards of waste, it goes down to about 10 yards of ash. And all of our ash is currently trucked across the river to Lewiston's landfill. They have a secure landfill. It's part of the deal when MWAC was established, that ash to trash was the acronym or the saying that was developed with that. And
Right.
there's a deal with MWAC and Lewiston for the disposal of that ash.
This footage started with a Lay's potato chip. He kept covering it, but you could tell it was Lay's potato chip. And he indicated it's going to take at least 30 years for this to break down, a very thin potato chip bag, whereas he showed when it burns how it combusts and shrinks down to nothing. Well, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer when we have all of these plastic bags that hold potato chips and whatever else that we're putting in plastic bags, they do not break down. And if they do, it takes a long, long time to break down, and it goes in landfills. I am not in favor of that. I'm in favor of making us as green as possible, and I was very convinced after I watched this particular research, and I'm a witness to that myself, being next door to MIMWAC, where they do burn it. So, I think with everything else, this is a big move for us. So if there's a way that we can have a little bit of time to try it, or whatever, rather than saying, okay, we're going to go 100%, that's all we're going to do, I just want to make sure things do change down the road. So I think that's the only, I'll come back to have another question.
There is an opportunity if the city were to do away with curbside recycling. There are receptacles located at Maine Waste to Energy that do accept Auburn's recycling materials, and those would continue to be in existence. And that would still be brought over to the Casella plant in Lewis.
My last question, I forgot.
Yes.
If I don't write it down, it goes whoop. What's the percentage of our citizens who do actually recycle?
7 to 8%.
8?
7 to 8. Yeah,
7
it
to
varies.
8.
Yep. And that's in terms of volume, not necessarily
Oh, right.
participation.
Thank you.
Do you had a question, Councilor Walker?
Not yet.
Maybe Councilor Walker, this could be to you or to Dan as well. The Maine Waste to Energy plant was, if memory serves me, the first plant of its type in America, and it was based on the European model that's prevalent there with regards to,
It's
remember that?
the first one, like the way this one burns and everything, yes.
Okay. It's something to think about too. Very good. Any questions? Councilor Lasagna?
So just building off what Councilor Fournier said about not rushing anything, I feel very strongly about that. And thank you, Mr. Goyette. That was a lot of really good information and some that I didn't know. I do think that there's a larger issue than just the cost and being able to burn something to get electricity to houses. I think it's something about this community, the decision we're going to make here. I think that there has been, I've never seen any education around recycling, and I'm not expecting you to do this, but I think there's been very little education at all ages and stages about the importance of recycling as a larger issue, not just the dollars and cents. And she said it's about around $100,000 a year for us to pay.
The actual program itself costs about $175,000 for the city, but if you transfer that material that would be recycled, you still have to pay for it as MSW, so it breaks out to about $75,000 to $100,000 in actual savings, or money that wouldn't be spent. I wouldn't say savings, you're not getting a check back, it's just less money being spent on trash.
I do think there are things that we need to consider, like other communities, not just in Maine, but around the world, when we talk about plastic bags, and I know that it's not directly a dollars and cents, but I think it is a bigger issue. So to me, what I would hope that we move towards is thinking critically about this, not just about the money that we're going to save in the next year or two, thinking about educating this community about it. Single stream recycling is not working for many reasons. I think this idea of wishful recycling is a concept where you think, I'm just going to throw whatever in this green container and it's going to get taken care of. So I think we need to have a kind of a higher level of thinking about what this means to our community making this decision.
Thank you. Go with Councilor Titus and I'll come back to you. Councilor Gary? Yes. And she had her hand.
No,
first.
it's
She had her
fine.
hand first? Okay.
It's what, I'll let him go next.
Okay, thank you. So, is my understanding that as long as it's clean and recyclable, most everything that's recyclable does get recycled? 'Cause
Yes,
the rumor
everything
is that-
does. Yep,
the only thing that doesn't that ends up in landfill is it's contaminated, correct, right now?
Glass.
And glass.
And glass.
And glass.
So we are getting something, or the other rumor was that the only thing that we were actually getting any money for was paper and cardboard and number 2 plastic, and everything else, there's no market for it. Is that not true, or?
Number 2 plastic goes to Alabama right now. This market is down from previous years. It's actually the same price. Everything is based on, in terms of, it's a commodity market. The price for virgin number 2 plastic is the same as recycled right now. So it's up to the industry whether or not that you want to use recycled material or virgin material. Number 1 plastic goes to Mohawk, and that's actually turned into fleece carpeting. Number 3 through 7 plastics actually go to the same plant in Alabama, and those are what are made into your paint cans that you see at Home Depot, those plastic paint cans, things like that. Cardboard stays domestic. It goes to Canada. It goes to New York. There used to be a large Asian market. That is no longer there. It used to be $150 a ton that recycling companies would get. Now it's down to $40 a ton. There's just a gluttony in terms of how much cardboard there is. Mixed paper goes to West Virginia, and that goes to a Chinese-owned mill. Due to the tariff situation, what happens now is the mixed paper goes there, it's turned into pulp, so all the waste materials off that paper are removed, and it's turned strictly into pulp. That is shipped overseas to China. That is exactly what's going to happen at the mill in Rumford that was just bought by the Chinese, which is great for our region in that this will have, right now they're getting about $30 a ton to send it down there. We should be able to do a little bit better than that because it'll be so close to us, we won't have to pay just the shipping cost. The same thing will happen where all the waste is removed from that paper, it's turned back into pulp, and it's going to be shipped overseas. Newspaper goes to Korea. That's about $20 a ton. We ship it to Boston where it's shipped overseas. Tin cans all go to Canada. It's about $120 a ton. Aluminum, Anheuser-Busch and Novelis takes all of that. That is actually $1,000 a ton. It used to be around $1,800, so you can see the market has really taken a dive from that. And then once again, glass is not recycled at this time because there's no facility to take it in our region.
Okay.
So it very much varies in terms of what happens, and it's all based on the market. The market could change tomorrow where something could be worth a lot more.
Right. Well, I mean,
A lot less.
I did a lot of
lot less,
research
yes.
on this, and, recycling is having a problem nationwide.
Yes, yep.
I went to a website, and this is actually quite a good one to look at. It's recycleacrossamerica.com, and they are really trying to advocate for reviving the recycling business through education, but relabeling and just completely redoing the whole process in terms of what people do and how they do it. Because a single stream, as we've heard before, can be a problem if you're throwing everything into one bucket, and now half of it's contaminated, and that's part of our problem, I think.
Yep.
But in this particular one, they were talking about how, unfortunately, in recent months, recycling processing plants have been shutting down. The largest recycling hauler in the U.S., also known for many major landfills, has recently closed 25% of their recycling plants. In the state of California, known for its recycling, more than 1,000 recycling centers and processing plants have shut down. And that's not, the collapse of recycling is primarily due to the high contamination levels in the recycling stream, which means the public is throwing out garbage and other, like you said, not in recycling bins. It cripples the economics of recycling. But the problem we have there, I think, is if we're going to hire people to make sure that that's clean before it goes, now we've cost us even more money to recycle if we have to continually, be sorting and double sorting and triple sorting.
To do something like that where you ensure that the materials you're sending are clean, you'd have to have a transfer station and attendants standing there as people throw things in.
And look
it
at it.
wouldn't be a curbside program.
That's what I mean, yeah. And then the New York Times had a great article. Michael Corkley talked about a city like Deltona, Florida, because of their high costs, they just discontinued, at least temporarily, their recycling. Another one, Sunrise, Florida, and Philadelphia has been having awful problems. And they actually went to certain neighborhoods that were doing a good job of recycling. They kept picking up their stuff, but the ones that weren't, they just stopped altogether and sent it to a landfill because it was costing way too much to try and handle it. I guess what my point is that I'm in favor of recycling, but it looks like it needs to be remade. The whole process, how we do it, when we do it, and what we do. And I almost think that we may want to consider a committee, in the meantime, holding off on spending money on the recycling, only because if 8% recycling costs us $80,000, if we do a good job and get to 40%, that's almost $500,000 at the current rate to recycle. If we do a good job, it's going to cost us $500,000 a year. So we have to fix the problem before we go any further, I think, and find a way. This website talks about relabeling containers, working with manufacturers to relabel what's recyclable, what isn't, and having everybody more educated as to how to recycle. But if we keep going down the way we're going right now, I'm afraid it's already expensive, but I can't imagine what it's going to be like even if we do a good job.
It won't We won't get a discount because our materials
No,
are.
that's what I mean. So it's
No
by
economy
the
of scale
ton.
on bulk.
So if 8% gets us 80,000, 40% gets us $400,000 in expenses to recycle, the way it's going right now.
Right.
So we need to have something to, maybe we got to stop the action, to look at it, have a committee, maybe a 1 year, have a sunset on the committee, look at it of ways that we can rebuild our recycling program and then bring it back, and have a budget that makes sense, and then a way to, because it looks like contamination is the #1 cause for our expense.
No.
It'll still always be an expense, but, right?
No, we don't pay extra or,
Well, we pay $125 a ton or whatever it is,
Correct.
and then if it's not recyclable, it goes,
I mean, we could
still pay the same
negotiate
price.
that price down maybe, but it's a fixed cost, whereas if we're at 20% contamination now and we get to 10%, I don't know that you're going to see a direct correlation in our reduction in cost.
Well, therein comes the problem, then. If we have a 50% recycling rate in Auburn, we're talking $500,000
Yes.
in expenses just to
Yes.
recycle.
Yep.
Counselor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When Auburn took the leap to go into recycling, we went headfirst with gangbusters. We provided the bins for people to get, and if they needed more than one, they could order one, and we delivered them. We gave out information on what to recycle, how to recycle, and when to recycle. But as time went on, it became a distant memory in most residents' minds, because as people moved in, people moved out, they weren't kept up to speed on what we were doing and what we were trying to do. The schools try hard to teach the kids in school how to recycle and what goes where. They try to bring it home to the parents, and sometimes the parents listens, but not always, and then it gets all mixed up. I do want to recycle, but I want it done the right way. And if it's going to cost us money right now, I would be sort of willing to consider suspending the program. But I also have concerns with how people can get out to Amway, or whatever they call it now, to bring their trash. Have you looked at the feasibility of having another site closer in town on this part of the city where people could throw their stuff in different bins?
I would be extremely against that program in terms of the Public Works Director, because all it becomes is a dumping ground.
That's right.
So it has to be a monitored transfer station.
It has to be a monitored facility.
I go
Versus
there,
a Goodwill
Otherwise,
bins
we'll
in the
get
mall.
everything and anything.
it has to be, I go there all the time, and
that-
you need to do that.
Let's change the dialogue just a little bit if we could. So I'd like to ask just a very pointed, factual questions to Dan right now, and then we can bring this conversation back internally and talk to within ourselves, of course. So is there any pointed questions?
Yes. If we're trying to be creative with recycling, why aren't we even trying to go one step further with our spring cleanup and get our residents to put like if they have a good bureau that they don't need aside from their really crappy stuff? And why don't we look at, which this committee that's looking at our recycling issue, maybe they could look at also our spring cleanup and try to figure ways to recycle, because the more we pull good furniture and things out of the trash, wouldn't it be a less cost for whom we contact to haul the
There
stuff away?
are numerous charities, all kinds of nonprofits that will go to your house if you have something of value and pick it up for nothing. Public Works does not have I have 47 people full-time for this last week and this week doing that. It costs the city over $110,000 in terms of straight salary and disposal costs. That doesn't include fuel, doesn't include injuries, it doesn't include time on the vehicles. If anyone's driven around, there's plenty to do. And for us to go around and pick things that are of value and put those aside so other people.
Oh, no, that's not what I was meaning. What I was meaning was if residents put themselves the thing away from their stuff. I'm not saying Public Works.
Maybe this is a good for potentially a committee to look at, because I think there's a lot of variables.
Because then
Might be off track on that.
people could pick it up and take it away, and then it wouldn't be left in that pile.
I tell you, they're picking it up and taking it away
I
now.
mean, that's what I mean.
Mom got a couple nice
We
parcels,
gotta,
actually.
we got to figure ways where those that need furniture or need things can get the things, and then by them taking it would lessen your load, and it would be better for the environment than having it taken, trucked to Lewiston, broke down, and disposed of. I mean, would save trees and help people to get the furniture they may or may not need.
Do you have a question specifically on
Yes.
recycling, curbside recycling, Counselor?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it's dealing with this topic. Now, when you talk about all this stuff that's going to Amway to be burned, do they still monitor what goes in there and what escapes and what level? Because I know at one time when Casella came to Lewiston, the city of Auburn was against them coming because of their reputation of bringing stuff in from out of state and bringing the medical waste and stuff to Amway.
Currently, Maine Waste to Energy accepts from a number of municipalities. They need a certain volume of municipal solid waste to burn to make the facility run efficiently. Auburn does not provide enough. Lewiston does not provide enough. They go around to neighboring communities. I don't believe they take any out-of-state trash. I don't run that facility, so I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure of that. Leroy may be able to answer that.
But they do contract with Costello, don't they, to take some of their stuff?
Directly, no, they do not. Casella takes things from us, which is bulky waste that we can't burn. That's the way that the contract works.
Well, that's good then.
Counselor Hayes, you got a question?
Two. One, I think there's a tiers or levels of preferred ways of getting rid of waste. Is, a high level. You know what, say, burning versus what those ratings and how the tier goes?
I'm not sure in terms of tiers, but I know that in terms of electricity generation, municipal solid waste burning facilities is ranked one of the best ways, and cleanest ways to generate electricity.
You said environmentally concerns too earlier.
The EPA ranked them top over nuclear, over wind, and over solar.
Yeah, I guess in rating ways of getting rid of waste too, I think actually burning.
It's much more beneficial to burn the waste because of the reduction in greenhouse gas emission versus letting it rot in a landfill.
The second question is, you spoke of glass, and I guess I was surprised that there's not a
Yeah, I was
market for
surprised
that.
as well.
When it goes through the incinerator, what happens to that glass? Just break up and then come out in smaller pieces, or does glass
Yeah, most of
actually-
it's broken up and then it's just landfilled. Yeah, it's inert, so that's why there's a push for legislation to make it mandatory for use in roadway gravels and projects like that.
But just as a comment, well, we'll have a discussion, but I've heard education several times, so
Yeah,
I
gotta
think we'll
start
get
on that
back
one.
to that.
So if there's any other direct questions for Dan at this point, then we can have this discussion internally as a council.
I just want to clear a couple things up, Dan, so someone don't call and say that you're wrong. We put in the new shaker magnet
Yep.
this year.
Okay, it was this year.
After February, so we don't want people saying it wasn't done before that. So this year that was put in, it's working really well. It shakes down, so it's the finest metals coming out of that are paying somewhere around $200 a ton for this fine metal that we never got out of it before. This is the first time this year that has started. Now, at the end of 1 year, I'll be able to tell you exactly what this plant is taking out for metals and how much, because every metal that comes out of there is a different price. I mean, there's some gold, there's some silver, there's this, there's that, so.
Is it sorting it as well?
It-
Is the machine actually sorting the metals as they come
Yeah,
out?
it does, some. It's some that it still blends, but most it will sort it because of the magnets. Certain things go to certain magnets and whatever. The other thing, you said 1/3 or 1/4 of the houses. That's-
2,000 homes.
Okay, that's only if the person buying the power
Right,
wants to do that. We
Correct.
do not supply 2,000. We supply a power person that buys it. They do what
You
they
broker
want.
your electricity.
That's right.
But that's
And-
essentially the quantity of electricity.
And we also use a lot of our own energy to run the plant, and that's why it runs efficient and cheap on energy.
Any other outdoor questions?
One more quick one, just to follow up from the stream that I was on. When I was hearing you say that the materials that in the recycle bin, they do go all over the place to be disposed of. So
Yes.
that must be part of the cost because of transportation, gas, the work, the manpower.
Yep.
So that, I would assume that is a huge part of recycle
I would
cost.
assume so as well, yeah.
Counselor Walker, follow-up?
Yeah, also, the plant is owned by 12 other towns and ourselves, and that's where we take most of our waste from. Although there are a lot of carriers that bring us in waste, and we can only burn through a 3 by 3 foot hole. So when you think about that, that desk you've got sitting in front of you would not go in there and be burnt. That would be bulky waste that would be hauled off from a contractor that we're involved with for hauling off big stuff. So we've been asked, why don't you put in bigger holes, bigger burners? You're talking millions of dollars to do that with the type of plant we've got. And keep in mind that for the past 4 years, maybe 5, but 4 for sure, we have kept our price at $41 a ton for the city of Auburn and the other 12 towns. You cannot get rid of waste anywheres or even close to $41 a ton, any place in Maine, for sure. And we can't haul it to Massachusetts because we're restricted from that. So $41 a ton is a real bargain, and it's because we own part of this business, and these 12 towns own part of the business. So it's a heck of a deal. And if we was to fall below 100 ton a day, for instance, we would be in serious trouble. And that's why we hope that we would continue to receive the amount of waste that we receive from ourselves and the towns around us.
Thank you. I'm going to bring this into just some dialogue. Dan, stand by. He probably will be needed at one point for clarification. Just to recap everything, and like Councilor Hayes stated, it looks like, again, this is just the part to get the conversation going a little bit further. Right now we have recycling in 2 streams. We have recycling through our traditional, very visible curbside pickup. We have recycling that goes on, and unbeknownst to probably 99% of the people in Auburn, that's happening through our normal trash collection. For example, metal, we're recycling trash into energy. So we have recycling going on in 2 different veins. It would seem that there's almost a duplication of efforts with regards to recycling through curbside pickup of metals and recycling through normal trash collection of metals. Because as we know now, metals all get recycled. It's just who controls that flow. So it's some interesting things here. A couple of observations, though. I will say, I'm wondering, and I haven't done all the math here, but if we're looking at protecting the environment, and Councilor Lasagna's point is very valid, it's not about the money. It's about what we're doing to decrease our carbon footprint and to really send a message about how, not just to people outside of Auburn, but to people in Auburn and children, we care about the earth. I know my family, when I talked to my wife about this conversation, she was mortified because we are just adamant recyclers. I get yelled at if I'm not washing out the dog food can, okay? Seriously yelled at, actually. And we sort, we put out, sometimes they pick it up, and sometimes, be honest with you, you probably hear about this, they don't. And I know your department probably gets blamed because they think it's one and the same. So we recycle. I've gone as far as researching what I can do, and this week I'm getting a full house solar array installed in my home. That's something I've been planning on for 3 or 4 years, and I got to thank Jim Wellahan and the Geiger family for showing that it's doable and you can do this effectively. And I want to publicly thank them because I'm doing it. And I'm going to cut carbon emissions over the lifespan of that, the 25-year lifespan, by 300,000 pounds of carbon emissions. That's something I'm proud of. That's visible. My kids are going to see it every day. So we're looking at what we're doing here, and we have kind of an issue. And I think that we're adding more to the carbon footprint by trying to recycle with emissions of the truck driving 550 miles a month on Auburn roads, picking up 8 or 9% participation rate in recycling, and then the transport up to Old Town for landfill, transport to West Virginia, so on and so forth. Rail, truck, who knows? We lose visibility. We lose what's going on in that single stream. I think we're all probably in agreement that single stream isn't working. I'd like to see if we have consensus on the fact that, ask a very simple question, it's kind of loaded, but do we all want to do our part as a city to send a message to help the environment? I think if we all can agree on that,
Definitely.
I think that's some common ground. The question is, I'm opening it up to you now, how do we do it effectively? How do we increase participation so it's truly working? And Einstein said, you can't expect different results by, was the definition of insanity, expecting different results by doing the same thing over and over and hoping for different results. Something similar to that, I'm paraphrasing. So, what do y'all think? Councilor Lasagna.
I think there's education that hasn't gone on. Since I've moved here, I haven't gotten any education about it, and I mean from little kids all the way up. I've seen what's happened around gardens and public gardens and healthy eating when that's happened. I also think that there are other things that we don't do in this community. It may be not using plastic bags anymore. There are a number of different things that don't just have to do with that green recycling bin out in front of your house. I strongly suggest that we have a committee of people to look at this. We don't know exactly what it costs to drive this stuff to Alabama, but it's probably not that difficult to figure out. I know I've spoken to a couple faculty people at Bates who would probably take this on as a project, actually through environmental studies, that would take this on as a project and be able to say, driving this to Alabama is costing this much in terms of carbon, as opposed to not recycling. There's some numbers that we could get that I don't think would be too hard. So I think, I really feel it's a moral issue and who we are as a community, as much of this money and all the details of it, but it's worth looking deeply into it, thinking creatively about what we can do, and also engaging a lot of other people in the community around this. We just don't have all the information.
Oh. Anybody else? Councilor Young.
Well, if we're trying to grade ourselves on how green we are, I guess the counselor has a point there. I mean, I know that these milk jugs or whatever, they go down in a 18-wheeler, goes down to, where do they say they went to? Alabama, whatever. You could try to figure out how much carbon that diesel truck gets, so if it just goes over to AMWAC, or what do you want to call it, and you burn it and it becomes energy, that may be a smaller carbon footprint. And I don't think it would take too long to probably try to figure that out.
Any other comments? Yep. Councilor Hayes?
Well, I guess I'm kind of on the fence. I think that I think we should go ahead and probably have a committee to, again, we've had committees in the past, and we need to go back and maybe revisit, reconsider. I think in the meantime, I think we owe it to ourselves to continue the process we're doing, but with the education of the things that really are valuable to be recycled as opposed to burn. But I think, again, burning to create energy is one of the preferred ways of actually discarding true waste. So I guess I would say that we continue with recycling for this next year, but with education, so that we are still going to have the cost of collecting. Hopefully we can get a better return. Maybe it would be actually less tonnage, with people understanding that, definitely, I know one household that has a lot of pizza boxes that they have been putting out. I know I'm going to suggest they do not. But no, I think that we do need to reconsider it. I think that, but I think there's some needed education. Again, like glass, that's a heavy item. if it can't really be recycled, probably it should just go in with the ash and, be truly buried.
Just a follow-up to Councilor Hayes. Dan, is that contract that we have with Casella, is that fixed pricing, partially fixed, or is it all variable based upon tonnage?
It's based on tonnage, and it's based on the average commodity rate.
So in other words,
It
there's no
floats.
floor, like just for the truck to drive around town, that's 50 grand a year In other words,
It's
there-
$102,000 a year.
for picking anything up. So if no one recycled, we wouldn't pay anything.
Well, we'd still pay the truck's still gonna drive around.
So that is a base price regardless of the
Correct.
percentage of.
Correct.
Okay, so just to follow up, it's, if we did make a recommendation, which honestly, I think we're all in agreement, listen, if you got glass, don't recycle it, put it in the trash. And metal too, for that matter, would decrease weight. Just thinking out loud on that one, because metal will get recycled for actually more money, if I heard the numbers correctly, more money through Maine Waste to Energy than through our agreement with Casella.
One of the benefits they have, I believe it's considered clean because it's been cooked. So there's no organics attached to it.
So basically, so they don't have to absorb the cost on the receiving end. Okay. So something to think about for the public, I think. There's some definite things that can immediately save money if that's what we're looking at. But to your point, education. I'm just going to throw this out there. We all agree environmentalism and the environment's important. Okay. Education is definitely low if we only have an 8% participation rate. What if we suspended curbside recycling for 1 year, kept recycling and enhanced it somehow over at the current Maine Waste to Energy plant, which exists, but see if we can enhance it. Take the accumulated savings, the net savings, and partition it out into two things. One is a very visible, very public, measurable, quantifiable way to help the environment, i.e. solar panels, what have you, okay? Another portion, what has a quantifiable and a payoff. And the other portion, to increase the level of education and to look at different ways, in this committee, look at different ways to recycle and to go forward. Keep the momentum going, but really focus on that education, increase the momentum upon a restart on a different formula, because frankly, right now, I think I'd make a very, very solid argument that you're doing more harm than good to the environment by continuing this process, as is right now. And you don't it just doesn't make sense in a couple different ways here. But that's my opinion on this, and again, this is coming from someone who has been to a lot of countries and seen a lot of pollution, and we don't want that here. We do have an obligation to act. It's just how do we act? So, Councilor Lasagna?
I don't think we do know the numbers that you're talking about. I think it's important to find out.
You don't know the other way either.
Nope, but that's why I think it's important to find out. I think another thing that really be cognizant of, if we stop this for a year, you're going to lose systems that continue recycling. You're going to lose people who got into it and you start it up again and they won't be doing it. I really think we should keep the recycling going as we both look at all of these different aspects of it, really what the cost is, and also do education around it.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Young?
I think I was just told that we've signed a contract to have recycling picked up, right?
Yes, but we included a 30-day termination in there.
Oh, so we can back out?
Yes.
Councilor Fournier?
Let's say that we have to stick to one entire 12-month period. Could we do it in a graduated amount of time? It won't take long. I mean, trash goes out every week, and the recycling is every 2 weeks. So you've got that going on a consistent basis. I'm looking at this as it could be a mix. It could be a mix of options as to what the committee would select. I definitely think it's a good idea to have a committee to study this, because those figures are not going to be difficult to obtain. You already have them in your head. You've already looked a lot of the stuff up, Dan. And I think looking at like halfway through a 6-month period, looking at what the statistics show us, monetarily and participation-wise, because we have had education on recycling. I get pieces of paper that come in, I get e-alerts that come in. We have had education, but we're not obviously getting to everybody. If the peanut butter jar is going in with peanut butter, So I think that,
We're not getting to everybody if 92% of people aren't doing it.
yeah, well, I mean, I know what I do. I'm anal about this, I really am. I just wash everything before I put it in, so it's nice and clean. So I think if we did, a concerted effort to maybe have a workshop on it, and then put something in the paper as part of an extension of what we're already doing. But I would suggest maybe a half a year might be a little more tolerable than a whole year.
You very well could be right. I mean, any other comments on this? Councilor Walker?
Yeah, going back a few years ago, as always, we can go back a long time ago if we want to, but we'll only go back just a few years ago. Dennis Dote was acting manager, assistant manager, public works director, all kinds of these things, and he was on one of the boards back then that tried to put out all the education that everybody wanted out there, sent many things home with all different people, kids, grown-ups. The city did a big promotion. If we go back there 5, 6 years ago, we had all these people sitting in front of us telling us that recycling was going to be the best thing that we could ever do. It'll never catch up to burning trash out at our place for energy today. And where are we? Now we're sitting here wondering, should we do recycling or not? We took it when Aho was here from 4 times a month we picked up recycling to 2, because back then the manager that was here realized that it was costing us a lot of money for only a half a green bucket most of the time. Once in a while you had someone that filled one up. So we went to 2 weeks. Now, sometimes you had one that was overfilled and they'd put it out in an orange bucket with the green that didn't get picked up because it wasn't the right color or it didn't say recycling. So it's been kind of a funny game for a lot of years. But we did plenty of education for a long time. We still never increased the recycling in this city. It actually went down. We had it up to about 13 for a little while, very short time. Then it fell off down to 8, and I don't believe we're at 8 every 2 weeks. But if your number's 7 to 8, we'll believe what you say. But again, we could run that truck once a month and pick up the recycling that's out there in half these bins. So
Or people could just
I
go
disagree.
can't they just go to Maine Waste and Energy and dump it?
They can go.
Minimal carbon footprint? It's open, it's free.
They can.
Right.
Mayor, I just wanted to, and I already said my piece about the research I did, but one of the things that they talked about was revamping your system with labeling and containers and the whole 9 yards, and this group is actually trying to make a nationwide effort to get states and federal government to help through a relabeling and education process. And there's ways you can get on and sign petitions to try and get that to be pushed a little further ahead, because again, there's a lot of money involved. I would like to see us suspend it for a year only because I would do 2 things. One, it would heighten the importance to get it back going again a year from now. Number 2, I would even be willing to take the money that we spend on recycling and put a pot of money together to do some relabeling of what the committee finds immediately needs to be done. And we'll have the money there to start getting a more quality system going. If we're only getting 7-8%, it's not going to affect the stream that much. But if we can come out the gate and bring it up immediately because we revamped it, we could catch up in a hurry. I'm just afraid if we continue like we're doing right now and maybe get a committee, maybe not, and there's no heighten of importance here, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. So I really think what I've read, it's a little more complicated than just sending out a flyer to educate people how to recycle. It has to be completely rebuilt to make it work.
Well, we're going to, parting comments here to the time, but then I think we're going to bring this back, and I have a proposal for kind of a consensus proposal. But Councilor Hayes, you had something.
Just a question, just to refresh my memory, the contract that we have before us, we've signed, but we have maybe a few days to cancel. Was that going to be a year contract or a 3-year contract?
It's 3 years,
3-year contract.
With a 30-day out.
with a 30-day out, yeah, for recycling, not for solid waste, but yeah.
Right. This is what I'd like to propose. Obviously, this is good dialogue. I think we all would agree. It's a good conversation to have. I think we're pretty close to something, just doing my mental whip count here. I'd like to propose that we have a resolution drafted for the next meeting or the next applicable meeting. If it's not May 20th, maybe it's a meeting thereafter in June. Talking about whether or not to continue this or not for the upcoming next 12 months. That way we can get some public input outside of a workshop, and we can also have some time to contemplate and look and do some further research as needed over the time being to make a smart decision.
Mr. Mayor, I go along with that resolve as long as the resolve includes the formation of a committee with a sunset,
Sunsetting clause, 12
like
months?
a 12-month or 24 at the most, so it's not a committee that's going to be long-standing, but just to get things going, and then a committee that can be called back if 3, 4, 5 years from now we are falling down again or whatever, can be brought back, but I would just say that would have to be part of the resolve.
12 months sunset with an option renewal. Do I get a little bit of consensus on that language?
Yes.
Or at least a
He
concept?
said 12 or 24.
12 or 24, but I mean, I don't care which, 12,
Why don't
if we can do it in a year, that'd be great.
Why don't we
but-
do 12 months with an option for 12-month renewal?
Okay, I mean, that's fine too, but I don't want it to be a committee that's long-standing. I think once we get the ball rolling here, it's going to be what it is. I
Cortez
don't think
birthed
we
the
need-
ships, and they conquered the Aztecs pretty quick. Maybe not a great analogy, but any other thoughts on the resolution? Inclusions? No? Okay. So we'll bring this back up during a regular city council meeting with a resolution. We'll draft it, circulate it prior. That way, give the public some time to comment. Again, some further research. Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Goyette. Appreciate your time. We're going to take just a 5-minute quick recess here during the workshop, then we're going to reconvene. We're going to talk about the capital improvement plan. Thank you.
Can I talk to you for a second?
Mr. Mayor, you're on.
Hey, folks, we're back. Part 2 of the workshop tonight is going to be a discussion from the city manager, Peter Creighton, on our capital improvement plan. Mr. Creighton, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. So we've already talked about a lot of the CIP items, not all of them. So I don't want to bore you. We do have some information here. We'll start with a spreadsheet, which you've all seen. Brian, if you could go forward to first page. Shows the listing of the CIP items. And once again, I want to thank the department directors for the work that they've done in presenting their capital improvement requests, and my budget team, Phil Kroll and Jill Eastman and Chris Muma, helping to review these items. Keep going, Brian. It's page 1 that we're looking for. So while we're waiting for that,
There it is.
here we go. Thank you. So this is what I'm going to call version 1 of the CIP. The reason I say that is you know about the discussion regarding the fire truck that has been put in the CIP request by the fire chief because we have a fire truck that does need to be replaced. It's a multi-purpose fire truck. This version shows 200,000 that has been put in as a placeholder. The total cost is 650,000. The idea would be in the next fiscal year budget for FY21, there would be the other 450,000 to be able to buy the truck. With this approach, the total CIP for bonding would be 9.5 million. And then the next version, Brian, which is page 5, shows 650,000 for the fire truck. So you'd be buying the fire truck itself. And the total would be 9.9 million, or 9,950,000 on the bond. That's probably the most significant change. We have listened during this process to the, obviously, questions that you've had, tried to answer them as best we can. We have made some other changes, like the scissor lift, working with the school department on that. So we're not going to have to purchase that. Thanks to the superintendent, Katie Grondin, and their facilities director. We're going to be able to borrow that, and we'll see how that goes. And if that works, that would be great.
If I could interject, just, sorry.
Go ahead.
That, I think, needs a lot of special attention, because the fact this is, I think, maybe the 3rd or 4th time in just the past year that you're seeing intercooperativity between the school department and the municipal side. That hasn't happened before. Okay, not to this level or extent. So we're saving money by maximizing something that's already procured. So I think that council and people in the public too should be very thankful that that's happening. We encourage that to continue. So whenever applicable, thank you. And thank you to the school department too.
Thank you, Mayor, for saying that. There is actually a lot of cooperation that's going on between the school department and the city, and I think it's improving all the time. And it's something that takes place with the finance offices, takes place between the city manager's office, superintendent's office, takes place with public works and facilities operation that Billy runs. So there's a lot that's happening in terms of the collaboration. So I could start and go through these, or I can turn it over to you and see if you have any questions, and we have the experts in the room to be able to address questions if I'm not able to answer them.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Young?
I just had a question about the, as far as the bonding of the fire truck as a placeholder or whatever, part of it, and then the rest of it in another year.
Right.
Does that mean that you would wait until the other part of, before you go out and sell that bond?
Mr. Manager, just, so the recommendation that came from the last meeting, and it's clarified in your sheet, is that there are items that are in the FY21 budget that would be brought up to the FY20. It would still be funding that would be in that $200,000 to purchase the reserve truck in those FY20 items for $200,000. FY21 would be the full amount, the $600,000 for the fire engine in FY21. So if you look at the second sheet with the new fire engine, it's $600,000 approximately, $600,000 for the new fire engine, plus, again, that we still need a reserve fire truck, and so approximately $50,000. So that $650 will be used to procure that reserve truck, plus purchase a new truck.
In this budget.
In this, it would be in FY20 if that was the one that would be approved.
Phil, actually, there's a slide that shows this, right? This is the one that was submitted by the fire chief. That's page 9, Brian, if you want to go to that. I think this is what you're talking about, Phil. That's the one, yeah. Okay. So that clarifies what you were talking about. That's right.
But we're still,
So, go ahead, Counselor.
by saying that we're still pushing out the purchase till next year. So we're not moving this year with the purchase.
Yeah, you've got a current plan, and then the alternate plan would not purchase the fire truck until FY21. That's right.
I came up with a different alternative.
Okay?
And it goes back to my earlier concerns with some of the monies that we are bonding for items that I can't justify. And that's the portable stage for one. I think looking at the figures, until we have events for sure that can use such a stage, because I think it was suggested it might be, whatever event for now, to me, the event has to cover the cost of the stage. Until we have a series of events that we can count on, and I think we recognize we need at least 12 to have it paid for in 3 years. We need about 35 events, 36 events to cover the cost.
Well, I'm sorry, why 3 years, though? Usually capital improvement projects are bonded out because the durability of it will last 10 years. So I was just wondering about the ROI denominator.
Right now, I can't justify it. It's another piece of equipment that's going to have to be moved around, put away, and maintained, and sometimes, particularly a piece of equipment that we're not using regularly, doesn't get the attention that it needs to be maintained. The other items, back under economic development and planning, I still have difficulty accepting $200,000 for Great Falls Plaza Vision. That's part of strategic plan, which we haven't seen yet. And I guess, again, we're suddenly putting a priority on it, which, as a council, we have not considered. And I guess the other issue is, I see what the potential is, but I guess it's a TIF district. If there's a project that comes along, I see it, whatever needs to be done, it's going to be covered by a TIF. So why bond something now that we're not sure of, and just to have money in reserve for that possibility? The other is comprehensive plan property acquisition program. I understand that, but I guess to me, the fire truck right now is more important than property acquisition. So those three items alone were the 200 already that we were anticipating, 200,000, 180 along now with 300, we're at 680. We could bond for the fire engine this year and have it. We wouldn't have to then, well, I guess with respect to the reserve, if we could continue to use the truck that we have now from Lewiston, if they don't sell it immediately, maybe we wouldn't even have that cost. But I'm still going to have to be convinced on the three items that I've just mentioned to approve, irregardless of the fire engine.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, and it's your prerogative. Just a quick comment, without dwelling on these items. On the portable stage, if you had an opportunity to go to the concert that we had at the arena the other night, the country music concert, that's an example of what we're trying to do. And that was, I thought, very successful. I had another event, as you know, we were both at for Citizen of the Year that was competing with that, but I did go over to the arena afterwards and had a chance to talk to staff. I saw the mayor there who had gone there as well after that Citizen of the Year event. And saw Councilor Fournier, I know Councilor Walker was there, and I'm not sure how many other, Councilor Titus.
Councilor Gary, I think, was too, right?
That's the type of thing that we're looking at doing. We're looking at having 10 events, but I can understand your concern. What we're trying to do is we're trying to stretch ourselves in terms of challenging ourselves to be able to do these events. And I think the approach that Mark Goslin has been thinking of is that we would have 10 events a year. Costs us $6,000, I think, per event to be able to rent the stage that we use for New Year's. That's $60,000. So over 2 years, that's $120,000. And then I think that Mark was thinking that we could get a sponsorship to help be able to pay it back within 2 years. I admire the determination to try and do that and to have us be successful. And I think it fits into what we've been talking about in terms of moving the city forward and sports tourism and the other discussions we've had in the past. Great Falls Plaza, that goes all the way back to the comp plan. It goes back to the ADAPT plan. It goes back to some work that was done years ago before I came here as city manager. Tom Platts is interested in trying to redevelop Great Falls. He actually is coming next Monday for an executive session to talk with the council and have a discussion with you. So I would just ask you to keep an open mind about that, hear what he has to say. I think he is serious about trying to do more there, and I know how challenging it is to try and get developers who want to come into the city and do things, although we've had some good success the last several months, the last couple of years. On the property acquisition, I think with the property acquisition, we have been very active in terms of trying to address city-acquired property and tax-acquired property, as you know. It has been a team effort. Jody DeRisco from the city manager's office as executive assistant has been a key to that, along with Jill Eastman and Eric Cousins and Derek Belanger and other folks who have been involved. And we have been able to move forward with that on at least a dozen properties, and we're doing some acquisition and demolition as part of that. So I think and Michael can speak about this, Michael Champions, I think that we are in need of being able to have these funds.
Okay, a couple of questions.
Sure.
One, did we use the same type of stage for the New Year's as for the concert?
No, actually, I think the one for the concert is more challenging. Again, Mark is here. If you want to hear from him, Mark, do you want to?
Yes, please,
wanna
because
come
I
up?
had a few questions.
And just so you know, it was a packed house. Very
was
good reviews.
stand-
Those are
standing
pretty
room
Fine,
successful.
if you have an event, then an event pays for what you need
Right.
to do it.
Right.
And I guess until we
No,
prove.
I'm good. I was just adding something. I'm not
Yeah,
arguing
no,
with
I
you.
just,
I'm just saying it was pretty good. A lot of
I-
people there. Okay?
That's good.
Mark?
Actually, the stage that we had at the concert, the stage that we would be purchasing would actually be more advanced than the stage that we had at the concert. It would allow more ability to do what we needed to do for that concert that night. For example, LA Harley wanted to put bikes up on the stage. Our stage that we would be looking at purchasing would have ramps to it. That would allow the flexibility for acts and allow to bring things on stage. We actually had to take a forklift and lift $40,000 bikes
Yikes.
up on the stage. Having that, having the stage that we were looking at purchasing would allow multi-use functions on it, not just a concert, but yeah, utilizing it for New Year's. I got to tell you, just an hour ago, we got a rider, an event rider, which is just basically a detail of a show, from a large group out of Nashville. They contacted us because of what they're reading online about the facility. They didn't get an impression from anybody else. It's about what they've been reading online about Norway Savings Bank Arena and the events. They contacted us. They usually do events at the sizes of the Cross Insurance Arena. Mayor Levesque happened to be in my office when that rider came in through my email. They originally were not going to look at us because we don't have a stage. Rory had to call him and convince him and ask him, hey, can we just have a phone call conversation about how we can work with you? Because typically those writers don't allow for stage rentals as being part of their fees. We have to have that already on hand. So we are going to be having a conversation with these people. They're open to it, but we got to try to convince these people in order to come here, we have to have the infrastructure units to do it. So when you talk about having these 10 events and having them on the schedule, it's hard to book them on the schedule when we don't have the facility or the equipment to do it. Some of those we can try to do on our own and try to put a budget together, and that's how we're trying to do things right now. Is we're trying to book these events with including the concert stage into the event pricing structure, which again, that limits us because when we ask for certain money to come back to the facility in order to try to help offset the cost of the event, we're now paying for other things and relying on other people to help us run these events, which is great. We have great community partnerships, but some of the stuff we should hopefully think long-term about and figure out how we can do it on our own and utilize community partnerships in other ways.
And thank you for that. Better understanding for sure. But I guess it still comes down, whether we bond it or lease it, the cost is there. So even if we bond it, it's not that we have the equipment free, we're paying for it. So you should be building in the cost irregardless. And, I guess, I know it makes it more difficult maybe for booking, but if we do have good partnerships and we know the equipment that's available on a lease rent basis, and we know that it can be brought in and set up and have a good, through that relationship, I guess I want to see it work a few times. And again, so we didn't have the same type of stage for New Year's so again, there's flexibility sometimes if you're renting versus if you have something, that's what you have to work with.
So Bob, would you be in favor of eliminating, just hypothetically, eliminating the stage from the CIP, but putting into our operating account $72,000 for stage rentals this year? Because renting versus owning, and then proof of concept over the year, and then we turn around next year, if it works, and spend $180,000 on the stage.
Yeah, I guess I would, yes, because I think
Yep.
it's recognizing up front there's a cost, and you've got to cover the cost one way or the other.
Right. You're also forgetting that we would be one of the few municipalities that have this, that we could also be getting rental revenue from from other community partners that might want to rent the stage from us. I've already talking to, I'm not going to bring up names of people. I don't think it's appropriate right now from a standpoint of being here, but I've talked to multiple partners who said, I would have something in my parking lot if I knew I had access to a stage. So that would be an additional revenue, just like renting ice, that what we do at the arena. That would be an additional revenue line for something like that we have, that we could offer back to businesses, organizations, nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations, any business that's looking for entertainment or hosting something could utilize, a piece of equipment like that.
So I guess, it gets down again, we've got to have a business plan if that's what we're thinking of doing, or having this that we're also thinking of renting out. That's a whole new, it's nice to have that revenue, but at the same time, it's a piece of equipment we're going to have to then maintain. And again, if you're renting it, you leave the maintenance of that equipment to somebody else, and you expect it to be, very usable and ready and maintenance-free upon receipt for whatever function you're putting on.
So if we could, and thank you for that, Counselor. I just, on the spirit of time and discussion, Mr. Manager, I'd like to ask you a question about these conversations we're having on this presentation. Are you inclined at this point to, based upon any type of comment or discussion point on the CIP line items, change your CIP proposal to the City Council at this time?
Well, obviously, what I'm trying to do is work with the council, try and get a consensus. I just want to make sure that all the councilors understand what the opportunities are and what we're trying to do here. I like what you suggested in terms of putting money in the budget to rent that stage. I mean, Jill, in terms of putting the money in the budget to rent that, I think you used a figure of 72,000. I mean, that's
6,000 off 12 events.
Whatever, that figure of 72,000, I mean, that's going to increase where we are right now. We're at 1.25%, I think, on the tax increase at this point in time. So having us leave the 180,000 in the CIP versus putting 72,000 in the operating budget, which has more of a fiscal impact?
Putting it in the budget, because if we bond this, the bond payments would only be $18,000 a year for 10 years, plus interest.
That's the number.
So,
And when I made that recommendation, it's because, and I think this is a message for the council too. What we need to look at, and I appreciate, Mr. Manager, you wanting to listen and get feedback.
Right.
But we're getting time to deadline. This is the fourth time we've had this conversation. We just need ideas. I'm almost under the impression right now that your CIP stays the way it is, but if we want to change it, we have to we amend the CIP during the reading, during the motion on the floor. We get the majority votes to change it, and we change it. So I mean, I think the time to dissuade the manager to change something before vote has passed, because we do need to have something that's clean and clear. And if it's worthy of changing with the majority during the motion, we change it then. So, Councilor.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. My concern is that years and years, we've tried to micromanage the CIP, and we think this works, and we happen to be a fan of fire engines, so we want these, but we're not a fan of dump trucks, so we don't want these, and it becomes really unproductive dialogue. What has to be the production is what we want to spend and what we can afford to spend. My concern is we're spending a couple $1 million more than we're paying off, which is not a good trend. And I know it's because of the LA 911.
It's not a trend. This is the first time in years this has
First time,
happened.
and it's not a good trend.
But it's not a trend yet.
Well, it will be, because we got a new school coming, and we know there's a lot coming down the road.
You're looking forward, but if you look at the 10-year run rate here, we've been decreasing our overall bonding dramatically.
And it's been a great plan for the city of Auburn to keep their bonding under control. And now we've reversed ourselves, and this board has got to decide, do we want to continue that? Because that means it'll happen again next year.
That's not
although it can't, because we're going to have more bonds to pay off, so the actual payoff number will be higher, and that just keeps chasing itself higher and higher.
Well, that's not my intent.
But hold on, but the facts are, I'm sorry, I have to correct you. And Ms. Eastman backed me up. The trend line over the past 10 years, that's a trend over time, has been decreasing the overall bond rate dramatically.
Correct.
So we can't say it's not fair, because it's an untruthful comment to say 1 year new bonding exceeds retired debt is a trend. It's not. And you
Well,
can't
Mr.
assume
Mayor,
what
please
future councils are going to do.
Let me finish what I'm trying to say.
Please do, but please, let's stay factual
No,
on what
because
a
what
trend
we-
is when it's not a trend.
As a board, we have to look at how much we're bonding, and do we want to increase our actual bonding, or stay the same, or actually pay off more than we're bonding? And it's always been our practice to try and pay off more than we're bonding, or at least stay the same. Next year, if we do decide to to bond less than we're, or more than we're paying off, we'll be paying off more because, guess what? We have more bonds. So the number that we're trying to stay at is now higher. And if we bond more, that number grows, and when we finally get to the school bonding, we're just not going to know where we're at, because we're going to have this huge number. So I think we have to look at, are we willing to bond more than we pay off year after year? And and you got to help us. I personally don't want us to do it. I know that what's still happening this year is LA 911 is causing a couple $1 million that we didn't expect, but we're going to continue bonding the same amount anyway. Lesson learned. We should have known when we voted for that it was going to affect our bonding and our CIP.
Everybody was told.
But
Everybody
it
made the
didn't
decision to
happen.
go
So
ahead.
now we're bonding $2 million more than we're paying off, or more. And that, to me, is not a trend that I like, and I don't want to see it this year. So that's my philosophy, is where I'm talking about. And instead of trying to micromanage. Now, as far as the stage is concerned, I would like to know, at that concert I went to was wonderful. I understand it was a free concert, though, for the people. 99.9 it made it a free concert, but we must have got fees to having it there. Did we make any money having that event? And if we did, including the stage, when you have an event, you rent the stage and you include that in your proceeds. So it doesn't have to be an expense account, because generally speaking, we wouldn't hire the stage unless we thought there was some revenue stream to pay for it, or if it's going to be like the January 1st celebration, there is no money being made, so that we expense that. But if we're having an event at the arena,
Mayor raised the money for
we
that one.
assume, okay, well, thank you. But if we're going to have an event at the arena, we assume that the proceeds from that event are going to pay for the rental, and it doesn't have to be a budget item. And it shouldn't be a budget item unless you're going to count the revenue, project the revenue for those 10 events.
Well, I think, our goal is always to try and make sure we
Well, first
break
of all,
even.
do we make anything on the, it was a great concert, and it was great for the city and understandable, but do we
We
make
made
anything
$15,300.
after all expenses?
No, not after all the expenses. So probably after the expenses, we were looking around 6,000.
So we rented the stage, we had overtime for police protection and all that kind of stuff, all the staff that worked.
Correct.
And we still made money.
Correct.
So we had the event, and I want more. The thing is fabulous. I was jumping for joy, and we don't need to budget 6,000 times 10 if we're going to have 10 of these kinds of events, because the proceeds will pay for that.
We
And
could
should
make
pay for
more
that.
money. So you got a fixed cost of
Well,
$6,000 for a stage.
But
You
what
got
I was
10
saying, getting
events,
back to what
you
Councilor
amortize the cost.
what
lower.
Councilor Hayes was saying is, if we had a business plan, if we did that, and then in this coming year, we get the business plan that shows, okay, we had 10 events, this is how much money that we spent on rentals that we can save next year, plus we've got these options that have come up that we can rent it out. And I think it's a great idea. I'm all in favor of ROI. To Councilor Hayes' point, though, we don't have any of that. We're just going on faith. And it's a little bit nerve-wracking to go just on faith.
Mark is working on a business plan, but Councilor Fornia, I know you had your hand up.
Right, I been trying to ask this question. I was there too, and it was fabulous. It was so much.
By the way, thank you for
Yeah.
all, for
Yeah, no, it
coming
was a
and
fabulous
supporting the
time. It was
event.
really
Fabulous.
Much appreciated.
Well put on.
You did get $10 per vehicle, but the other thing to consider that I wanted to say is that there were a lot of vehicles that went to other places to park, so we would have to have some sort of a lid on that kind of thing, because we're going to be losing revenue if they're going everywhere to park. The other thing is, this was free, and is it your intent that these activities that you're going to, events that you're going to schedule will be, people will have to pay to get in? I don't mind, I think it's great, goodwill to have a free one once in a while, but we can't have all free ones. And
Correct.
I'm sure you don't plan
Correct.
to do that.
This was specific to this specific event.
It was an opener, a good opener.
We have a great, we were lucky that the Wolf and Benny Media and, Ellie Harley trusted.
They're always very good to
They
people.
trusted the fact that this venue was going to put on a, 5-class,
Right.
state-of-the-art event. And, that was just the structure of this event. Other events will be structured differently. Come July, at the end of the month, right now, again, something that happened today, we're looking at another event that's going to be a paid event at the end of July. Again, that's going to be something, we're going to have to build a stage into the cost of the event. where what we're looking to do, and just speaking to the mayor's point, is having the ability to have this in here so we don't necessarily have to build that into the event every single time that we host the event. Because, guys, there's going to become a certain time when we won't get certain acts or certain people that come to the event because we have to overprice ourselves to get people through the door. So having the ability to have this piece of equipment, not just for us, but just for any event that we have in the community, will be extremely, and again, the reason why it's so expensive, okay, the reason why it's so expensive is because of the flexibility of the unit. Most stages you have to find storage place for. Like, most buildings have storage units where you could just put it at the back of the house and pile up the stages, right? This is a portable unit. This is something that we can just hook to a trailer and take someplace. If we were to have another stage, we would have to load it into a trailer, unload it off the trailer, set it up, where this is going to be parked somewheres where we could have it parked, and then we can use it at our need and whenever we need to use it. And we're paying for the flexibility for the unit itself.
The one with the ramps that you mentioned, I can
Yep.
certainly see the need for ramps.
Yep.
No
There's-
question.
there's
And
ramps, there's
Do
wings.
they rent with option to buy, that kind of thing?
No, I checked. Unfortunately, I
Bill
did
and
check
Jill.
with the company. They don't allow us to kind of rent it for a year and then look for an option, simply because it's built to what we ask them to build it for. And, if they take it back from us, it might be hard for them to actually recoup the selling it afterwards, simply because someone might not be looking for the same stage that we're looking for.
So have you, in your mind, kind of like figured out with all the paid events that are to take place, plus the parking, plus if we can obtain more parking, can you kind of figure out roughly what you would be making for revenue, what we would be receiving? So that
Again, it all depends per show.
kind of
I mean,
balance out the
it-
cost of the stage?
Like, for example, parking, we might not charge parking for every single show. The reason why we charge parking, because this was a free event for people, and we wanted to provide some preferred parking for those individuals coming to the event. We made $1,800 on parking. Our parking lot was pretty close to full. So,
Yeah.
we needed that
Not quite
overflow
packed,
parking
but-
across the area.
Right.
And, some events will be free parking, simply because they're coming and paying a ticket to come to the event. We want to make it easy for people to come to an event. We wanted to make it affordable so that people in the community can come to a great event. It doesn't hurt their pocketbook too much, and they can have a great time, just like they did at the, it's always a balancing act with these things.
It is. I know if you go to Portland, you're going to pay for both. You're going to pay to park, and you're going to pay for the event, which is going to be a large sum of money. So I think a smaller amount of money to park, probably $5, if you're charging for tickets. I wouldn't let them park for nothing. Personally, we're not going to make any money if we keep doing that.
And if we could, thank you. So I'd like to just give her, at 7:05, we do have a special meeting with one topic on the agenda. I'm going to postpone the start of that special meeting for another 10 minutes to get any direct questions out. But I am going to ask, this is one more question. Is this a last workshop on the CIP that's scheduled for the remainder of the budget season?
We have Jill, we have the 5-year CIP coming up. What's the date on that?
5-year, we done.
May 20th. So
So that's the 5-year look forward to.
That's the
5 year.
plan, that's
Yeah.
the
That's the plan, okay.
I do, what we have it scheduled for first reading on the bonds for the 3rd of June. And in order to do that and have the first reading and a public hearing, it needs to be in the paper on the 20th.
Okay.
So I will be advertising it for next Monday.
I'd like to get a little consensus. We can ask some more questions. We'll have some time. I'm not forgetting you, okay? A little consensus right now on agreement on the CIP as is, where is on the city manager's side. If we want any changes on the CIP, then we need to bring that in front of the reading during a motion and vote on them. Everybody okay with that? Because we're going to go around and around forever trying to argue one salient point over another salient point and micromanage the city manager's job. This is your last best offer, and it's up to the board to make decisions going forward,
I'm
correct?
fine with that.
Counsel?
I think, I don't think this council's fine with what he's presented.
That's fine.
And-
You don't have to be. We don't have to. We can make changes
And
on our own.
this has always been the type of budget that people have had a chance to say that they don't agree with this, this, and this. I can tell you the very simple one. You're the manager, you cut another $1 million from that and I'll vote for it. As it is now, I won't. You take away whatever you don't want in there. But I want $1 million less than what you're predicting here to spend.
Okay. Are we all set with the concept of less than best, or best, excuse me, final, from the manager, and we'll make cuts and determinations on our end? Okay? And if you're not, then we can go for hours and hours and hours and never get any further than we are now. Am I wrong? You've been on the council for 30 years.
I'll take that.
Not as a compliment.
I'll make one.
Not as a compliment.
I'll just make one statement. To me, piece of fire equipment right now is more important, a higher priority than particularly the stage. I'm sorry.
So this-
I think for our public, when it comes to safety, that's a priority.
So question, so again, back to what I said, this is the last best. We can make, through the parliamentary procedure process, amendments and vote on each line item the way we want. We've done it in the past. Do it again. Because I think at that point, because people, you might not have a majority consensus. You might speak the loudest at this point, Bob, which might convince the manager to change something now in the 11th hour that we don't agree with. So we should have every decision at this point going forward be up to a vote. Majority, stand or fail, if it's fire engine versus stage or whatnot. Sometimes you just got to go with it, right?
Mayor,
Hold on, I had Councilor Zani, then Councilor Gary.
I do want to say, I think we've had this discussion before, that it's not our job to micromanage what you're doing. I think that you are doing a great job. I think that this budget is high for this particular department. And I also think that there is a business plan. There is a sports tourism study that is a year and a half old that Mark was probably not asked to look at that as terms of his planning, and I think that's negligence on our part. I know we're looking at it, but I hope moving forward that we're using that as a business plan in terms of not only sports tourism, but also entertainment.
It's certainly part of it, and the reason that, we've done what we've done in terms of hiring Mark and some of the changes that have been made is to try and position the city to be able to take greater advantage of that opportunity.
And I think we've already started that process. If you look at the Huddle Up report, which I did when I first took the job, within that first week, I've read it now a couple times since I've been back. We've already, kudos to everyone here, is whether, we haven't realized it or not, is some of the stuff is already starting to happen from that report. I think to your point, Councilor Lasagna, is that we need to maybe have a more focused approach with it, more than just I don't want to say haphazard because that's a negative term. I think it's more of really just having a more consistent and focused approach within a distinct strategy of how we focus on that.
And I think that'll take it out of this, get rid of this, to really have, like you said, a business plan.
Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this CIP and city's budget is bull poop. I think we could have come in a little bit lower. We made the school cut themselves. I don't want to cut us till it hurts, but the CIP, I'd like to see more than $1 million that Councilor Walker wants. I'd like to see at least $1.5 million, maybe $2 million.
I'd like to see $4 million. Anybody got five? Five going once, going twice?
I agree with what Councilor Titus has said about why bond, yes, things are necessary, but why bond so much when we can, when we've got so many other needed things? Like what good Councilor Hayes says, we need the fire truck. We need that more than we do a big piece of equipment for public works, that truck that they say that's going to tear up some of the roads that we just had done in New Auburn.
That was told, that wasn't happening. Those trucks weren't being used there.
But still, it could end up there, you never know.
It's not being used, supposed to be used on the major roads.
But then it still could maybe cut up some other things.
And aliens could come down and rip up the roads with their little tripods for their UFOs. That, you have to stop the conjecture and, when we let fear dictate what's going on, then it opens up the variable world tremendously. It doesn't.
Mr. Mayor.
You got to
Mr.
stay a
Mayor.
little straight on that.
Mr. Mayor,
Make stuff up.
you're supposed to be parliamentary and quiet when
Yes,
others are talking.
But you can't make stuff up. You
Oh,
can't-
I'm not
you can't
making
not
stuff up.
Tell the truth or exasperate. It's just elaborate. Excuse me. But go on. Continue.
It's our job to sit down, even if you put us in a room and lock the door and televised, for us to hash this out of what we actually want in here and out here instead of, great. I understand what Councilor Lasagna said. We can't micromanage the budget, but we can set the bottom line. The city manager said at other meeting when we were talking about we should cut this item from this budget, that one from this one. He'd rather hear us cut a bottom line figure, and then he would go back to the departments and come in lower. If we are elected to do what's right for our taxpayers, and that's to try to keep the mill rate as low as possible with everything that's coming on our plate. I can't jump on the fence and keep saying, I'm going to allocate or try to allocate same sort of money for the school as a city. That's the same mantra I come in, and Katie knows that. I say, hey, you come in with a budget, but you know I can't, in good conscience, vote for everything. Same as I got to hold the same line on the city side. We got to work to keep it in check online. I don't agree with a lot of this stuff, and I could go through the list like the good Councilor Fournier and good Councilor Walker. I'd rather, like I said, cut the bottom line and get him to cut it. Then he would work to know what's really necessary. In regards to the stage that they want to buy, yeah, it is a big ticket item, but I also think we shouldn't be bonding as much. A certain percentage of each event that uses it should go towards it. Maybe not the whole 6,000 that he's estimating, but at least some of it. If we kindly rent it out to others to use, who's going to be liable for it if something happens, if somebody gets hurt on it? Are their insurance going to pick up the cost if something got hurt on using it? Or is the city's insurance? And are they going to be responsible if we rent it out to them? If something happens and it gets destroyed or broken, are they going to help pay for it being fixed? Or is it the city and the taxpayers?
So, it's 7:15. Do we have any other questions? Was there another hand that I missed?
No, Mr. Mayor, I just
Titus?
want to reiterate what I said, that when it comes to the budget and the CIP, we do have to direct what the bottom line is. And then if we have specific suggestions or questions or additions or deletions, we can put those in. But I think we should all somehow be able to come up with a consensus on whether we want to bond more, less, or the same as we did the previous year.
Well,
Or that we actually retired. What policy do we want to have going forward?
it sounds great in practice. I will say, being on boards of directors, running corporations, seeing other corporations, what happens is the executive, the CEO of a company, will then on the following year present a CIP budget that's significantly higher and negotiate amongst yourselves to still get what the manager wants at the end of the day. Not saying this is human nature. That's what you do. If you look at it historically, that's what department heads do. Department heads' ask lists are significantly higher than the manager's ask lists. So it could work 1 year, but then the next year it will be completely different and it won't work. So just think about that. And I do believe using the argument with recycling that Councilor Lasagna made, it sends a message to our community and to the entire region that the council grasps basic economic sense, frankly, when you're talking about amortization of capital expenses, your return on investment. If we're going to act like a business to a certain point, we have to make sure that we understand how businesses are run. So as we go through this process, getting down to crunch time, we need to have that level of expertise, or at least enough to make smart decisions that are going to be benefiting or not benefiting Auburn for generations. So, is there any last questions or comments to the manager?
Mr. Mayor, we also need to trust our administration and our staff. We can ask them to make a change or do something, but then we need to trust their judgment in terms of how they decide to approach it.
That's why I said we tell them the number and let them make the decisions of what to do.
It's a random number.
It's that we trust them to do it, but we need to be the one that set the number.
Yep.
Not just-
I agree with setting the number.
Based on fact and reality, not just conjecture.
Well, whatever, but
I mean, otherwise we keep, I made our report, Leroy's and mine, and I had certain cuts, and we don't want to micromanage, but my thought is, give you a number and you cut where you can with the number that we give you.
So,
It's too high.
without any lack, or the lack of resolution or order from this council giving appropriate direction on this one, and we are in workshop, this could be obviously addressed at a latter point or on a line item basis. It's up to the manager, administration.
Can we just share a couple
Bill?
numbers with you, just to try to help clarify some of the comments that were made? So in FY7, the city took a bond out for $13 million. The debt at the end of that fiscal year was $73 million. So that's where we stood as a city at that point. At the end of FY19, we'll retire just under $8.5 million is what we'll retire. The city's debt at the end of that fiscal year will be $47 million. So from 73 to 47, we're retiring actually, if you want the number, it's $8,455,732.
Okay, so it was $1 million over what we're retiring. So I was mistaken. I said it was $2 million. It's $1 million over.
But we still owe some money to what we went short 3 or 4 years ago. They're the $1.5 million that we had to do whatever we did to pay back and whatever, so we didn't have the amount of money to put into the money that we're supposed to hold in case the city falls into trouble.
Oh, fund balance?
Oh, fund balance?
That's fund
Well,
balance.
we made the adjustments that we had to make within the city, and all the departments, the school department contributed as well to that issue.
Yeah, but the one before we fell short the second time, all that money, I don't believe, has been all replaced to get us back to where we were when Clint removed a certain amount of money to pay bills that weren't taken care of.
Who would have that information?
Finance, I would hope.
Finance? So could finance manager check into that to see?
Counselor, when you're talking about money replaced, are you thinking accounts within various departments? Is that what you mean, or the
No,
fund balance?
the fund balance, we used to hold the fund balance. I don't remember the exact amount, but we'll say
Yep.
it's $8 million.
Right.
We got quite a bit below that for a little short time there, and we said we would get back to that before we would start jumping up into the high numbers of
Right.
making these bonds. Like now we're going up to 9.5 million or whatever, so.
Well, we are building the fund balance back, and I would say that this is an anomaly because of what's happened with 911. If it wasn't for 911, you'd be looking at $7,950,000.
You can ask somebody to make.
So this is not a trend, as the mayor was talking about earlier. This is a situation that we're dealing with this year. And, I am interested to know if there are other councils that feel like this number is too high. I think what we've tried to do is we've tried to present a reasonable CIP just as we have a reasonable operating budget. And on the operating budget, I heard the comparison with the school department, and I appreciate what the school committee and Katie have done in terms of their budget this year. And I support what they did. I think that in terms of what we've done as a city with the resources that we have available, coming in at 1.25% or 24% on the increase is a very good effort and hard work done by all of the departments, including the contributions that have come from the council and from the mayor through your ideas and through the discussions that we've had. I didn't think that we'd be at 1.24% when we started the process. When we started the process, we were looking at 10% increase. So there's been a lot of hard work that's been done to get to where we are now.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Manager. We're going to adjourn the workshop for tonight, and we're going to reconvene immediately our special city council meeting.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to wait for Peter to get back.
He's used to getting a little break.
Not tonight. No break tonight.
Go on.
Wait till Peter gets back. Okay. Hold on one second. Okay, so where I'd like to call to order this workshop of May 13th, excuse me. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of May 13th, 2019. Please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We only have one topic on the, hello?
Something's not working.
Test.
Hello?
We're off. Test.
Best kind of meeting.
We're on now.
Yay.
Oh, there we go.
Testing? Okay. Sorry about technical difficulty. We have one item on the agenda tonight. It's order, Sue? Do I have to read the order in its entirety, or the person making the motion, or neither?
No.
Very good. We have order 67-05132019, adopting the fiscal year 20 Auburn school budget. At this point, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd
Councilor
like
Titus?
to make a motion that we approve order number 67-0513219, and I'm just going to read a couple of the important document lines, because there's many of them, but item 12, that $42,001,875,000 be appropriated for the total cost of funding public education from pre-kindergarten to grade 12 as described in the Essential Programs and Services Funding Act, and that $16,355,070 be raised as a municipal contribution to the total cost of funding public education from pre-kindergarten to grade 12 as described in the Essential Programs and Services Funding Act in accordance with the Maine Revenue Statutes Title 20A, Section 15688. Also, I'll read item number 15, which says that the school committee is authorized to expend $44,955,256 for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2020, for the city's contribution to the total cost of funding public education from pre-kindergarten to grade 12, as described in the Essential Programs and Services Funding Act, non-state funded school construction projects, additional local funds for school purposes under the Maine Revenue Statutes Title 28, Section 15690, unexpended balances, tuition receipts, fund balances, state subsidy, and other receipts for the support of schools.
Very good. Do I have a second? Do I have a motion from Councilor
Second.
Titus? I have a second from Councilor Lasagna. I'm going to open this up to the public for comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this item? None being? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council. Is there any conversation, debate, questions? Councilor Titus.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say that I want to thank the school committee and the school department for coming in at a zero,
Negative.
a negative, actually, negative $100,000, which is a negative 0.56 in the spending plan this year. I would want to point out, though, that there was some help with the state, and we are spending about $1.6 million more than we did the previous year. But of the state funding and other revenue streams have brought that so that the tax levy is a negative number this year, and I want to thank them for that.
Very good, and I think I'd like to join in Councilor Titus. I think we all are very appreciative of the hard work that both bodies have done together, and finally with the school committee and administration. So thank you for that. It sends a very powerful message. Is there any other comment or question about the school budget? None? Okay. At this point, I'd like to ask for a vote by a show of hands. All those in favor? All those in favor? Yeah, you can, that's a cue. Opposed? Abstained? None being? The motion for the school budget passes unanimously, vote of 7-0. I'll now ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion for Councilor Zani to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second?
I got a second from Councilor Titus. All in favor by a voice vote, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Good night. Please stand.